Well, hello again and welcome to another edition of the Good News Gang. And this is an unscripted show brought to you by myself and my colleagues here. And if you're joining us for the first time, my name is Pastor Matt West, and I serve at Marble Memorial in Milan, just south of Ann Arbor. And today I'm joined again by Pastor Jackie Ranieri from Clare, UMC. Pastor Curtis Clark from Marysville, UMC, and also Pastor Kim Metzer from Hope UMC in Hastings. And as I said, we are the Good News Gang. It's still funny for me to say this, but it was something that we wanted to come up with, and Pastor Jackie thought that it was very fitting for what we were doing. So we are trying to bring the good news, and we're a gang of, I don't know, misfits, sinners, pastors, whatever you want to call us. But we are taking this opportunity to offer a new experience to go beyond Sunday's message and dive a little bit deeper into the Word and those messages that we've shared with our congregations on Sunday mornings. And we're going through a series called, not called, but dealing with Paul's letter to the Romans and the church there. And we are looking at Romans chapter 8, verses, I believe 12 through 25 is the overall spectrum or passage that we're looking at, but we're going to focus it down to some of the verses in that passage. And our theme this week is labor pains. And to get us started, I asked Pastor Jackie if she'd be willing to share a story with us. So, Jackie, would you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about your story, please?
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you. Being a woman, of course, and getting married and, wanting to have kids. And I think we all, as I should say, as girls, guys don't really probably think so much about it. But as girls, we can't wait to be a mom. You can't wait till you get to that point in your life where, you have kids. And you always think of that part. And, and you hear the stories of like, oh, I just love being pregnant. And I did. I was the healthiest I think I ever was that time during being pregnant. And you just think as you're pregnant of all the times when the baby's going to be here. I can't wait for the baby to be here for this. And I think, husband and wife can both fit into that, dreaming and visioning of what it's going to be like to have the baby around the house and just how life is going to be different and things going on. But I don't think anybody really focuses on that moment. And, and for me, it was like, everything was all natural and just being there and, those labor pains started, but they started like 5:00 in the morning and I just was dealing with it. And I was just like, oh, good, I'm going to push and we're just going to be done with this. It's going to be great. And I can't wait. Life is going to be so excited. And it was like, so I went to the hospital at 5:00 in the morning and they just checked and they said, you haven't even started yet. So walk around the halls a little bit. We'll make you happy just to say you were here for a visit. And then he sent me home and I'm just thinking, what? It was kind of devastating and like, oh no, these are pains. And so the whole day progressed and it actually progressed all the way until like 10 o'clock when I was just tired of having the pains. We called at 6 o'clock at the hospital. Can we come in yet? And they're like, nope, check the breathing. We were still too long. And it was just, I was growing impatient. And it was just like finally 10 o'clock, we were like, I don't even know. We were just like minutes between that. And they're like, what have you been waiting for? Get in here. So we hurried up, get in the car, and we head out to the hospital and we get there and we're sitting there. And again, it's like, okay, now we're at a wait again. And then the doctor came in and next thing you know, a girl at a hospital, like on the other side of town is in faster delivery, labor than I am. So he leaves. So I'm sitting there and we're waiting. We're just waiting and waiting. And I just like, I just want to push. That's all I want to do is I want to push. I can't wait for this to end. I can't wait to see the baby. We didn't know boy or girl what at that point. And so the next doctor comes in, he's all ready to go. And he comes running in and he says to the nurse, how long do we have? And she's like, you don't have time to change. We got to go. So he's in his jogging outfit and flip-flops. Yep, we're going. And so all of a sudden we're sitting there and it's like all exciting. And he's like, okay, Jackie, start pushing. And I was like, oh, hell no, I'm not pushing. I'm done. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. Can we stop? Can we just, and the look on his face was like, no, the next part is you have to push. And I was just like, nope, not going to happen. But, as labor goes, I had no choice. Vinny was pushing. He was ready to come out too. So it was just interesting though not interesting, I should say. The funny part is, after he's been born and all the excitement of, oh, it's a boy, he's healthy and all that, it's like you forget about those pains you went through. It's like, I don't even remember saying that to the doctor. I mean, he came back and laughed at me afterwards, but I don't ever remember saying those words, but those are the words I used. Everybody was like, oh yeah, that was you, saying that. So yes, that's my labor pains experience that I got to endure.
Well, thank you, Pastor Jackie. For those of you who don't know Pastor Jackie, she is always good for an entertaining story, and we love that about her. And ask her about Loverboy sometime if you want. But no, it's a great segue into our conversation today, and part of why we asked you to share it was because Paul uses the experience of labor pains in this passage we're discussing this week, and ultimately the reward that we receive when we can go through these pains, or we can work our way through these pains. But to go back to Paul's words a little bit more, I'm going to ask Pastor Kim if she would read some of those verses from this passage this past Sunday, just so that we have something to go with our conversation as well. Pastor Kim?
Sure. Thanks, Matt. So I'm reading out of the Common English Bible translation this week, and I'm just reading a couple of the verses of the scripture passage that Matt referenced earlier. So I'll be reading chapter 8, verses 19 and then 22 through 24. The whole creation waits breathless with anticipation for the revelation of God's sons and daughters. We know that the whole creation is groaning together and suffering labor pains up until now. And it's not only the creation. We ourselves who have the Spirit as the first crop of the harvest also groan inside as we wait to be adopted and for our bodies to be set free. We are saved in hope. If we see what we hope for, that isn't hope. Who hopes for what they already see?
Thank you, Pastor Kim. Wow. I love listening to Paul's words. Not that I was out persecuting Christians, but for me, I just relate a lot with Paul going from that rough life as Saul to, the Apostle Paul that we know and read his letters. For me, I find inspiration in a lot of what Paul writes. And I think sometimes he's misunderstood as kind of being this, maybe this rough dude. And I think people just need to read more to understand him a little bit better. But anyway, squirrel.
Good to know that you were not persecuting Christians, though.
No, trying to live that life in the Spirit that we talked about last week. I certainly don't want to fall back into, or fall into a life of sin and death, but anyway. So we're fortunate enough with Pastor Jackie and Pastor Kim to have some clergy that have went through the experience of labor pains, but for Pastor Curtis and I, we can't necessarily speak to that. But what I'm going to ask Pastor Curtis to do is maybe share some thoughts on where Paul might have been coming from and using this analogy in what he wrote.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think when I read the text and having studied a little bit about Paul and just looking at some background, I think we talked last week that he's writing to this church of Jews and Gentiles, people who have come back into Rome from exile, who have been treated harshly, who maybe have experienced personal persecution, whether it's physical, emotional, spiritual. They have been slandered against, they've been put down, demeaned. Obviously, the Gentiles aren't accepted as God's chosen. And so he's kind of got this, island of misfit toys, if you will, that he's writing to. And I think when he talks about labor pains, he's kind of broaching or kind of, he's able to, I think, really gain their attention, because obviously the women would have firsthand knowledge of this. The men obviously not, but Matt, as you and I know, as fathers, we're in the room. We're in the room where it happens. For those of you who have been watching Hamilton, we were in the room where it happens. We were there. We can be there. We can hear those groans as well, and just empathize with what our spouses are going through. Not obviously able to relate in any way. And so I think Paul does it to just kind of grab their attention. And again, also knowing that, family in that culture was a big deal. It was important to carry on the next generation. So he's just, I think, trying to reach and trying to make the point that life right now is hard. Life right now is difficult. It's painful. It's hurting. It's unusual. But there is something worth everything that you're going through waiting for you. And that's, what Jackie just shared too, is that it's worth it. It's worth it.
Right. So how do we look at this passage and relate it to today? I'm not going to say today's world or the time we're in, but just how do we relate this passage to today? How can we look at it in terms of, going on through our, or moving forward in our own journeys? And I'm leaving that open to anybody if you got a thought.
We're in the midst of a lot of pain right now in all different areas, and not just COVID. We're living in a divisive world, in a polarized world, and we can't seem to find common ground in any area, and that is painful and it is hard. But as Christians, we know that there is hope, and it's worth waiting for. And it's painful in the process, and sometimes we lose sight of that it just seems like too much, and we don't want to deal with it anymore. And just like Jackie in childbirth, we want to say, oh hell no. I can't do this anymore. But there is a glorious prize waiting for us, a reward at the end that we just need to keep pushing forward.
Right. Jackie, you look like you had something you wanted to share as well.
Well, as along the lines of what Kim was saying, we are a broken world. We are, and I think what baffles me, like just talking with some people that, and I shared this earlier with our discussion, that people are baffled, well, I'm a Christian. Why do I have to go through this? Why am I having to have pain? Why am I struggling during this time? Why do I have cancer? Why do I have this? And it's like, why not? Why not you? Why not us? Why not, why, of course we're going to suffer through this. And I think that's where we see the hope, I think, becomes more beautiful for us. When we see the outcome, the same if you want to go back with the childbirth, yes, it was a lot of pain, a lot of, getting through it, but what a great, you forget all about that when you get to the end, when you see the grand prize at the end, and whether that's being, childbirth, or whether that's being just getting through all your chemo treatments, or getting through finding, finances where you never thought you were ever going to find it, or a job appears that you were, waiting to happen. And the struggling, it really makes you thankful for that time. That may sound silly to say, thankful for struggling, but you realize how good the outcome is when you have to wait for it a little bit.
Yep. I just had this conversation with someone recently, is how do we know what's good if we never experience the bad?
Right.
Which Paul references, and says, if it, I believe it was back in chapter 7 where he says, if it were not for sin, then I wouldn't be able to be where I'm at now.
Right.
Something to that effect of like, without sin, I couldn't be here now saying what I'm saying, or I couldn't live a life in the spirit without having known sin first.
Right.
And I agree in the fact that, it's difficult. And Paul even reiterates at the beginning of the entire passage that we focus on this week, starting at verse 12, picking up from last week, where it's like, reiterating like the importance of living a life in the Spirit versus a life, of sin, or living in the law of sin and death. And I think the importance for us as Christians and followers of Christ is that if people see us, Jackie said, well, why I'm a Christian, why am I going through this?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's to set the example for the non-believer to see ultimately what Paul's trying to tell us here, that the reward is what we're reaching for. Like, yeah, we're going through these same things that even non-believers go through, but you can see maybe the difference in the fact that with Christ in our life, the reward that awaits us, as Paul mentions, by going through these pains. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I just thought of this, and I didn't bring it up in our pre-conversation, but I think it's applicable. I sat this morning with a member of my church. He's 97 years old, just received a diagnosis last Friday of stage 4 liver cancer. 4 months. It was given 4 months. It could have been 5 to 7 with chemo. He's chosen not to do the chemo because it would be 4 months of a somewhat quality, or 5 to 7 of battling cancer and chemo. And so as we were talking this morning, it just now kind of reminds me of what Paul's talking about here, that there is this great reward waiting for him. I know it. We talked about it. He's going to have to go through some pain, some groaning. His family's going to need to be patient with it. We're going to need to be patient with it. And he even said, he says, I don't know what's waiting for me on the other side. And I think that's what Paul's getting at. We read, Paul says that we groan inwardly while we wait for our adoption, the redemption of our bodies. I mean, he's talking resurrection. We know that. We have faith, we have hope in that, but yet we still don't fully know what that is.
Right.
And as I was sitting with Roy this morning, we just talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we can all face death as this man is, the world will be a better place.
Well, going back to what Kim had shared earlier about hope, and then just, your thoughts, that pulls me back to verse 24. We were saved in hope.
Yep.
And if we see what we hope for, that isn't hope. Who hopes for what they already see? Just, mind blowing. Like, it's, I can't imagine, for us, years and years later to hear those words, probably a lot different than when Paul was sharing them, at the time when this letter was written. But let's turn it around, because we all know the conversation that comes about in all facets of our worlds right now in this pandemic. What is the pain and what is the reward for what we're going through right now? Or how does it relate to our churches? I'm leaving this open for all of you.
Mm-hmm.
Just the way we worship is a pain. It just is. We were created for community. We were created for relationship. And having to be like this, where we see each other, but we're not with each other, it's a pain and it's hard. So helping each other see the reward at the end of this. So what is the reward at the end of this?
Yeah, I think the fact that we can gather, that we some are gathering in person, some are not, and I wonder if the reward is on the end of backside of this. Is this maybe it's a deeper appreciation, a deeper love for worship? Mm-hmm. That's what I'm hoping, that we don't take it for granted, that we don't. I think there should never be a time that we want to miss worship. And I think I'm thinking of the it's an older Christian song, And the lyric goes something like, forgive me for what I've turned worship into.
Yes.
It's all about
It's
you,
the newer
Lord.
version. Yeah, it's all about
Yeah.
you.
It's all about you, Lord. And that's why I think maybe that's what that's what the blessing is on the backside of this, is that worship now becomes, for us, and I'll speak for us as pastors, we want worship to be authentic. We want it to be a moving experience. We want it to be just shake us and rattle us and touch us to the core. And I think we've gotten away from that. We've turned it into something that it's not. So maybe, not being able, like Kim, like you just said, not being able to worship like we want to.
Right.
Maybe we'll come back to that. The heart of worship, that's what it's called.
Part of word, yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Running it around in my head, trying to
Yeah.
come up. Yeah.
But the other beautiful part, though, too, and I mean, I've experienced it, even with the previous church I was at, and it's just reaching those that we are online, reaching those that we really don't realize or know who we're reaching, and, that consider us their church. They consider us their pastor, and that's that always just thrills me. And I would just think that's just, I just get excited about that, because it's like, I may never meet half these people in my life, but it's just nice to know that, going online, doing what we're doing now, it's different. It's not, but some reason that person's connecting with me, or they're connecting with the church somehow through music, through however it is that we're presenting it or it's coming across, but they're connecting with us, and they're calling themselves. That's the part that best baffles me, is when they call, our church is their church.
Yeah.
Right.
And I've shared several times where, I've gotten a call to go to a hospital, and I have no idea who this person is. Why did they call me? Why? Well, you're their pastor, so the person on the other end at the hospital is kind of like, you fool, what's going on? They're saying you're the pastor. Are you a pastor or not? Get in here. So you go in there, and it's like, you don't want to look like a dummy, but you are dumb, because you're like, I never met this person. I don't know. The name doesn't even ring a bell. I have no clue who this person is. And that person is so excited to see me. So I put the smile on. It's like, oh, hi, kind of thing. But it makes me, it humbles me, because it's just like, wow, God works in great ways. And God, that is that hope there that Paul says, and who knows, where we're going today, and how today is, because we keep saying we want to go back to normal, we want to go back the way it is, but what is going to be our normal? What's going to be, a year from now? What are we going to look back, and what's it going to look like? I'm sure it's going to be different. I'm sure we're going to, yeah, I mean, it is different. We're worshiping different. We're not worshiping like we're used to worshiping. We're not, we're not holding hands, and we're not, whatever, but it's just that whole, it's a whole different look that we're doing.
But I think the reward in what we're doing and going through right now, although it may be a pain, the people that you said we're reaching, that we probably wouldn't have reached otherwise had it not been for this time.
Right.
And I certainly think there are those that we're even unaware of that we're reaching, not just virtually in terms of being watched, but right here in the heart, and hopefully opening a door and starting a relationship with God that they might not have otherwise had it not been for this.
Right.
So we're getting at the end of our time here this week, and so I want to just give anybody a chance if you have a final thought you want to share. If not, I'll go ahead and wrap things up, but I wanted to at least give everybody another chance if they wanted to share something else before we conclude today, or we finish this week's video.
I just wanted to say that I hope that those that watch this really take the opportunity to gather, either virtually or appropriately distanced with a couple of friends, and talk about those questions that we raised during this. What are the rewards? What are we hoping for? And how do we keep that hope going? Because that part of verse 24 is really what struck me out of this, is who hopes for what they already see.
Right.
So.
Thank you. Jackie, Curtis, anything you wanted to share before I wrap it up?
Go ahead, Curtis.
Oh, go ahead. Well, for me, it's just be patient.
I was just gonna, yeah.
Sorry, be patient in waiting for the Lord, and be patient in all that we do, especially now.
And I agree with you. And that was practice patience and especially when it's a time of struggle. I think that's really when we need to be lifting it up to the Lord. And that's maybe that time when we really need to sit either it's in silence or finding a devotional, or my favorite thing to do lately has been journaling and just write it down and what are you struggling with, especially during that time of, why me, or struggling with that time is like, when's it going to happen? When are we going to get back together? Patience, you always hear practice patience, and
I also hear don't ask for patience.
right. That's true.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, right there, same as what Curtis. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you to my friends, and thank you to those that are watching. And we are so glad to have this opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into the Word and the messages that we have shared, and just appreciate this time that we're able to share together. But I want to just offer a final thought of my own, which I guess great minds think alike, because I was going to follow that patience line of thought, and that, we live in a world where we want the easy button. Staples has the easy button, or one-click shopping like Amazon offers, and we don't want to go through the trouble or the pain to get the reward. And I think Paul is trying to offer us a reminder of that. If we can get through the pain, the reward will be that much more glorious. And I'm going to go ahead and use the final verse from this week's passage to wrap things up. Verse 25 from chapter 8 of Romans says, "But if we hope for what we don't see, we wait for it with patience." Thank you again to all of our friends and families that have been watching this. And again, I will encourage you, as Pastor Kim did, to just take this discussion further yourselves. Get together with friends and family and neighbors and talk a little bit more about what we started here. But join us again next week as we take another look at Romans. And until then, peace be with you.